Good evening, my name is Keith Bradford. I'll be reading from my book, Holy Spirit. I looked up from my lunch of yogurt as my phone sang its ringtone. I fumbled through the files on my desk until I grabbed the battered phone and thumbed the speaker switch on. Brandy? The phone rang out. What's up, Dan? Good. He's always good for anything for a diversion. He's a bit more exciting than this earnings spreadsheet detailing my lousy quarter. Are you free tonight? Yeah, I've got to pull some stitches over at the Hunter Ranch this afternoon, but after that, I'm good. I shoveled another spoonful in my mouth, wishing for a baked potato instead. I wanted to check out something, and I wanted to see if you were interested. Oh, Dan, is this a date? I giggled as I could imagine him blushing on the other end. Not really. I just wanted to check out an area before it got developed. Sure. Where is it? Can I tell you tonight? 7 perhaps, out at the diner? Well, now it's a date, you dummy. I'll see you then. I punched the disconnect button and shook my head. He was too paranoid to tell me things over the phone, but he's going to talk his head off in public at a diner. I finished my lunch and turned back to my books. I managed to pull into the parking lot at 7:05. His wrecker sat in the parking lot mocking my tardiness as removing a couple of stitches had turned into an emergency berth, followed by a dozen staples into one of the cowboys who thought he knew how to catch a thrown machete. I quickly combed the twigs out of my hair and threw an old cap on my head. I know this place had seen worse than me right now. Dan was in his usual booth in the corner. I slid in just as the waitress walked away. Hey Dan, I spoke as I flipped over the grimy menu and perused my choices of heartburn. Hard day at work? He glanced at the bloodstains on my shirt. Things got complicated. I noticed the bags under his eyes. You don't look good. Lisa called. Sarah's not doing well again. They're going back to Houston for more tests. Oh, damn. I squeezed his hand as I thought of his little daughter. Barely 2 years old when Lisa left him due to me, Sarah was the reason most of his money from the mine went as fast as he could earn it. Born with a heart defect, she had racked up some tremendous medical expenses over the years. Without a complaint, Dan did everything he could to make the bills, even if it got him thrown in jail. They think she's rejecting the donor's heart, Dan's voice faltered. How's Lisa taking it? I handed him a napkin as a tear managed to break free and was starting to track down into his cheek. We stopped talking as the waitress approached. We both rattled off our orders and resumed when she left. Downright bipolar. For about a week after I get a check off to her, I'm Prince Charming, but the rest of the time she just goes on about how worthless I am. Bipolar, I smiled. That's pretty accurate considering she was diagnosed with it. Most women in the medical field are a little strange, you know. Really, Doc? Dan smiled. Score 1 for him, I guess. Touché. She'll be fine. I paused as I took a sip of water. So where are we going? Camp Holy Spirit. You might want to bring a gun, though. Wasn't that a church camp around here? I adjusted my steaming plate of the meatloaf special that the waitress had slid across the scarred tabletop. Yeah, it got shut down after we graduated and went off. Dan took a sip from his drink. 97, a big storm came out of nowhere and a huge tree dropped on one of the cabins. 12 kids, 1 counselor got smashed. That would be enough to shut you down, I mused as I ate and tried to remember the stories of the place. I'd never been, as I was always shuttled back to Dad in Dallas during the summers. Didn't you work there? 6 years. Not much else to do for a kid around here once school lets out. I worked in the kitchen mainly, but I led hikes around the mountains for the kids. What happened to the place? While the real estate business out here wasn't exactly booming, an old camp like that would still be worth a pretty penny. It got tied up in all the lawsuits. The churches that were running the place had managed to shelter themselves with tons of legal paperwork, so only the land got seized. Payouts were made by the camp's insurance, but no one has done anything with the land until now. You say now like something's changed. Firm out of Denver has managed to buy it. Half of it's going to be subdivided off into high-dollar homes, and the half with all the cabins will be renovated into a conference center with a tennis camp. Well, you don't seem like the tennis type, so I guess you're not happy with this. No, I'm not. I've seen things up there, and that area doesn't need to be developed. It needs to be saved. Like what? Dan always had a nose for finding weird stuff. Camp would always close on Saturday and be empty until next Monday. Dan fumbled around his jacket and produced a yellow piece of folded paper. Mom couldn't always pick me up on the weekends, so I ended up staying there quite a few times. I would go wandering around some of the older trails. One night I ended up getting lost pretty bad and got caught in the rain. I spent the night in an old cave. It wasn't until morning that I found these on the walls. Dan handed me the sheet of paper. Dan, I paused as I studied the paper. These aren't pictograms that are up here. This looks like something out of the Grand Canyon. If this is real, it needs to be reported. I'll be honest, I'm not above stealing Spanish gold and running it down across the borders with my friends, but I draw the line with native stuff. Those people got shafted by everyone. I know. I was in a big hurry. Those were all the ones I could draw right then. That cave was big, and I don't know what else was in it. Would you be able to find it again? Lord knows I've led us on a few wild goose chases. Not every treasure lead pans out. Most of the time you'll come up empty and spend the rest of your life wondering if you were wrong or if somebody just got there first. I think so. Once I got a hold of some decent maps, I was able to fix my position a little bit better. I was on the northern edge of the camp, and I think I've been able to find the trail that I was on. So, what's the plan? I leaned back in the booth and stretched. This Friday, come over to my place. We'll head up early Saturday and try to find the trail. We can see if we can find the cave, and if we do, we can report it. We'll come back on Sunday. Sounds good. My last appointment on Friday was at 2 p.m., which was plenty of time to get cleaned up and make it over to his place. There's one other thing. Dan spoke softly as I looked down at the table. What? We have to find Lydia. Lydia? Who's Lydia? I held up my hand as the waitress approached. You know what? I ate good today. Don't answer that till the apple pie gets here. The waitress smirked as she turned around and headed back to the kitchen. Lydia. For a man I've known from high school, he never fails to surprise me. Maybe I'm a tad jealous, but Dan's about the only friend I have in this town. The waitress slid the pie-laden plate in front of me, and judging from the scoop of vanilla ice cream she had thrown in, she had noticed my tone of frustration with him. I tore into the treat and savored the taste. Okay, Romeo, tell me about this Lydia of yours. It's not like that at all, Dan smiled. You remember when I came back from the military? Yeah, I remember you showing up after your mom died. Then you disappeared for a couple of years. After that, I heard you were living in some abandoned camp or something on the mountain. Yeah, I was living in Crossman Peak most of the time. Downright psychopathic if you ask me, just living alone in the wilderness that way. It's not really alone. There's plenty of people living in the mountain off-grid. Great. You and a bunch of other crazy loners. I bet you had nice parties, didn't you? You ever been by Carter's Crossing on the last weekend of the month? I thought back to the last time I'd been out in that area. Sure enough, now that I thought about it, it did seem like there were a bunch of worn-out dirt bikes and pickups that had been flooding the small general store's parking lot. He hosts them every month, but most people only come out on the even months. He'll let you camp for free in the field behind the store. Dan watched my face as I slowly processed the information. It's almost like an old rendezvous. I thought back. There were like 50 vehicles there last time. I pushed my empty plate away. That's almost more cars than this town has. Where do all these people come from? It started with shell-shocked guys coming back from the Korean War. Dan fiddled with his hat. Since then, they reformed a loose society based on the old miners' district. People who don't want to go back to a normal society are drawn into this. There's not much rules, but there are a few things, and the district provides a framework to handle it, complete with a judicial process and everything. It was last month they were deciding on a guy for tampering with another person's traps. Obviously, since I don't live there, I can't vote anymore, but I do keep tabs. So what does this have to do with Lydia? Lydia was a woman who lived with a guy called Colorado Charlie. Dan motioned to the waitress who refilled his coffee cup. While I love the man, it's never a simple story with him. At first, everything seemed okay, but after a few months, she started showing up with bruises to the meat. Then she stopped coming, and Charlie wouldn't tell us what was going on. We were suspicious and paid a visit when he was off checking his line. We found her half-starved and locked in a cage. We took her in and paid a visit to Charlie. He admitted it, so we held court and passed judgment, as it were. What do you mean by that? I shuddered at the thought. Due to the abuse of her and other evidence I don't want to remember, it was deemed that he was too much of a risk for our society. We couldn't go to the police and most of us were laying low, so it was decided that he was going to be put to death. Dan offered a tattered newspaper clipping from his wallet. Lost hunter falls to death from trail, the headline screamed. Was this really necessary? I recoiled from the newspaper. For her, maybe not. Dan looked at me with a haunted look deep in his eyes. That stock pot full of human bones, on the other hand, yeah, it was. So what happened to Lydia? I asked, stunned at the thought of Dan dealing out a death sentence. We helped her move out to the old camp. She didn't want to go back to the real world, but she didn't want to be around us anymore either. Last I heard, she's still there. If she's there when the company takes claim, they'll put her in an asylum. She'll die in there. So why can't you get any of your other buddies to go get her? It's complicated, Dan shook his head. The camp's too close to town and outside of the district. The deputies have started patrolling Holy Spirit Road, and a lot of those guys still have warrants. Also, some of Charlie's friends went after her last year. I think she may have been the cause of some of your side work last year. 2 guys with homemade arrows? I asked as Dan nodded. I never got word how that turned out. I also wasn't happy about being blindfolded and dragged out to the middle of nowhere to work on them. I did appreciate the venison, though, that I got paid. Yeah, I heard. Brian didn't make it, by the way. The infection was too bad. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes as I remember the wound. Whoever hit him got him deep in the chest with a homemade napped glass arrowhead. If I'd seen him a few days earlier, I might have been able to help. Don't be. He was a bit of a dick and a thief as well. Okay then. Not your friends. Why you? I found her. Dan looked away. She opened up to me and told me everything he had done, not only to her, but the girl that had gone missing. I spent an hour with her holding a knife to her throat. She recognizes me. I may be the only one she listens to. I sat at my desk and scrolled through the Tribune's website. I reread the article that Dan had pulled from his jacket about the unknown hunter slipping off the trail. It's hard to believe that frontier justice was still alive and well in this year, but the facts were pretty clear. Dan's a pretty complicated guy. I've been with him as we've stolen some sacred stuff, but he usually drew the line at hurting other people. For him to agree with something like this, it had to be serious. 3 months prior, the article spoke of a search for a missing hiker. Alone, female, and unarmed, she had been last seen on one of the trails. Only by following the links was I able to find that her wallet and coat had arrived at her parents' home about 6 months later. I guess the ad hoc court out there couldn't bring themselves to make the notification of death. Given from Dan implied, I'm not sure I'd be able to be up to task either. Brandy, there's someone here to see you. Lynn, my tech, knocked on my office door softly as the unwanted guest brushed past her and paraded to my office. I watched as a month's worth of my files scattered in a burlap sack hit with a soft thud as he dumped the contents of one of my chairs to the floor and collapsed onto the worn upholstery. By all means, barge into my office, molest my staff, throw my things around, and make yourself at home, I said as I leaned back from the desk. Ms. Stevens, I think you know me. Gerald Sealsby leered at my tech as she retreated into the billing area. Considering how thoroughly she had just been groped by his outstretched hands as he passed by, I couldn't blame her. Word is you and your convict boyfriend are hunting for artifacts this weekend. I demand that they be turned over to my museum for safekeeping. Gerald, I stopped as he held up his hand and interrupted me. That's Dr. Silsby, thank you. What exactly are you a doctor of, pray tell? I leaned back in my chair and glared at him. I'm a chiropractor and the curator of the Museum of the Southwest. I will accompany you to the site and I will be in charge of the findings. I shook my head. I'm afraid neither of us doctors are true archaeologists, so you can drop the act. You run a roadside tourist trap, and I'm willing to bet half your finds are out on the black market as we speak. I had some scruples, unlike this guy. Rumor was Silsby was one of the biggest sources of native artifacts. His MO was simple. He'd muscle in, claim he was the expert, cart everything off to his museum, a rundown double wide. It was a mere coincidence that these same artifacts ended up circulating to wealthy private collections, just like the coincidence they had a new truck every year. Now, Miss Stevens, I know you have been known to pocket some things here and there. He smiled as he nudged one of my file folders with his foot. Maybe, maybe not. I paused as I thought I saw movement. Damn sure don't mess with native artifacts, so bad medicine, as the locals would say. Gerald opened his mouth and stopped and looked down at his foot. Sure enough, Ralph, my pet rattlesnake, had escaped his bag after he'd been thrown out of the chair. Pungent smell of ammonia filled the room as a wet spot grew across Gerald's ample lap. Don't move, man. While I really didn't want to deal with the aftermath of a snake bite, if anyone deserved it, it was Gerald. You've already pissed him off by throwing him out of his chair. Ralph coiled around his leg and tested the air, his tongue constantly flicking. His 8-section rattle occasionally shook out a warning note. Not enough for him to be really mad, just enough for him to get his point across that he thought he was in charge. People don't give reptiles enough credit. Ralph was just as cunning and manipulative as any person. I slowly stood and reached for a snake stick.